Hello friends, I believe that you are much better at Dota than what your current MMR shows. In fact, I'd argue that your correct MMR is probably somewhere between 500 and 1000 higher than what the number currently shows. At first, you might very reasonably think that I've lost my mind, or that I'm just buttering your buns so that you watch the rest of my video, which by the way I would appreciate, but this is something that I genuinely believe. The fundamental reason that I believe this is because there are 4 simple, purely psychological tricks that you can abuse to gain MMR that the large majority of Dota players are not using. At one point or another, I had a big issue with binge queuing games and losing them all. So I was reading up a lot about the psychology of addiction, grinding, being in the zone, how to properly learn, and so forth. In the following weeks, I applied a lot of the principles that I learned in my research, or at the very least, I was far more aware of certain common psychological problems that I would likely experience while playing Dota. Since forcing myself to play only when certain personal psychological constraints were met, I very quickly went from being a mid 6k MMR player for literally years to about 7500 MMR for the past 1.5 years. What was most intuitively surprising, but perhaps not logically surprising, is that when this MMR increase occurred for me, I was actually playing way less Dota 2 than before. So, with all of that being said, this video will be covering some of the science of positive psychology, its very real effect on your gameplay in Dota 2, and how to abuse some simple psychological tricks to gain a ton of MMR. In something called the Broaden-and-build Theory of Positive Emotions by Bill Fredrickson, which I've linked in the description, it suggested that positive emotions cause you to have exploratory thoughts about a subject that causes you to quickly increase your skill at that subject when compared with somebody who is not experiencing positive emotions. Being better at something, as we all know, tends to make people feel pretty damn good, which in turn causes them to increase their skill, and the cycle repeats. Essentially, positive emotions increase your awareness to the point where they've done eye scans and people will literally look around a physical room more, scanning for more details around the room if they're experiencing positive emotions rather than negative or neutral. This effect that positivity has on our desire and ability to learn snowballs, seemingly with no upper limit until you either die happy and skilled or have an eventual downward spiral. In Dota terms, if you can find an easy way to experience some positive emotions during a game, no matter how small, they can eventually spiral upward to the point where you're both happy and learning quickly. For Dota, fast learning is very important for 2 big reasons. The obvious one is that there are frequent patches, so the quicker that you learn, the better you'll be at a patch earlier than your opponents. And 2, within a game, you have to learn lessons in order to win that particular game. For example, if an Earthshaker shows in vision with a Blink Dagger, you have to very quickly internalize that fact unless you want to get 5-man wiped in the next teamfight. So, as much as PMA is a meme in the Dota 2 community, it's a fact that you'll play much better Dota if you are experiencing positive thoughts. Here is where I will propose the first of the 4 rules that we'll be covering in this video that I think you should follow in order to gain MMR. Be nice to people, even if they're dicks. Remember that it's not about benefiting the guy who's a doorknob, it's about feeling good about yourself, so that you can continue being productive. In fact, a follow-up study built on the Broaden-and-build Theory concluded that simply writing about positive emotions improves an individual's happiness, which in Dota terms means that being nice to people will actually improve your skill. On the flip side, another study found that the inverse of the Broaden-and-build Theory is true as well. Negative emotions cause defensive and regressive behavior, which will cause downward spirals if they aren't controlled. Being Dota players, we are all very well aware of how easily a snowball is started. Feed an anti-mage 1 kill by accident in the laning stage, and all of a sudden the guy has a 25-minute Battle Fury Manta style Abyssal Blade. Moral of the story? Very trivial negative things can start huge downward spirals, and people never take it seriously until they suffer the full, unrelenting repercussions. But with a bit of a change of perspective, we can prevent massive future loss in MMR by nipping a future downward spiral in its bud by giving negative emotions the respect they deserve when they're actually small enough to stop. So, this is where I propose the second rule. Use the quit after 2 losses strategy to guarantee that you stem the bleeding on the potential and inevitable downswings that are bound to happen. Huge loss streaks are what cause the most MMR loss. It is certainly not the Knights of going 2 wins and 3 losses. In the Dota 2 pro scene, there's a bit of a strange stigma associated with mental health. People are more than willing to go over replays with you and talk about the game as much as they can, but when it comes to maintaining a chill, stress-free, positive environment, the conversation shuts down. Get good is the general attitude and response. It's your problem if you can't take the heat and not a problem with the team environment. This attitude spills over to Reddit, where you'll frequently see people say, "It's the internet, man. People are rude," or something along those lines as a defense when somebody calls the Dota 2 community toxic. And for this reason, I believe that positive mental health is one of the most severely underrated ways of getting really good at Dota very quickly. People see it almost as a weakness in the community when somebody admits that they can't deal with the toxicity. Notoriously, OG has an amazing psychologist working with them, so admittedly people are starting to take this aspect of Dota more seriously, but the stigma is still largely there. If the anecdote of a team winning TI twice in a row isn't enough, Harvard professor Shawn wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage, where he covers a number of case studies with Fortune 500 companies where he would teach executives some simple tricks to make them happier every day, and they became significantly more productive. The number that he cited in his TED Talk, which I've linked in the description and would greatly recommend watching, is that people become 131% more productive when their brains are in a positive state. 131%. Think about that number for a second. What's your current MMR? Now imagine somebody who is 75% as good as you. That's the difference between an Immortal player and a Legend 1. How do you think a Legend 1 mid laner would fare in an Immortal game? That would be a complete disaster. It would be like putting TI5 Sumail mid 1v1 against present day Sumail. With all that being said, then why do we all play Dota when we're clearly experiencing negative emotions? If we truly care about MMR, or even if you just care about skill, then you would only play Dota whenever you are in a verifiable happy state. Here is where I will propose the third rule. If you have identified that you are feeling any negative emotion at all, go get your dopamine from somewhere else other than Dota. For me, I play Minecraft when I'm not in a good state of mind for Dota. Dota's too competitive, and frankly, it's not going to do your psyche or your MMR any good to keep playing. Of course, on the matter of perspective, that is internal, and therefore well within your control. But, as we all already know, Dota is very good, if not the best game on the planet, for bringing out the worst in people, due to its competitiveness and plenty of other factors. A lot of people think that they are somehow above this negativity, and that it doesn't get to them, but I conjecture that for 99% of people, it actually does. It's like the people that say they don't care about something. If they didn't care, they wouldn't care enough to tell you that they don't care. As a personal anecdote, I recently muted all enemy chat in the Dota 2 options because people flaming me was causing me to subtly tilt. And I also didn't see any good reason that I'd want to see what the enemy team has to say because, of course, they're enemies. Since I muted all enemy chat, my MMR has shot up from 7k to 7,300 over a couple of days, and I can confirm that Dota is the most peaceful that it's ever been. The reason that's true is because it's way easier to deal with 1 or 2 people being assholes on your team, rather than an entire enemy team of assholes that are, of course, trying to tilt you, plus the assholes on your team as well. There's a hilarious video by National Geographic, which I've linked in the description below, where they have a guy who is very good at basketball shoot 10 shots in a net. He hits about 8 or 9 of them, 80-90%, that's pretty good, that's an A depending on what country you live in. Then he does it blindfolded. He actually starts getting a decent amount of them in, but they have a crowd booing him regardless of the outcome. Then he takes the blindfold off, clearly thrown off by the crowd, and he misses almost every shot. He went from a 90% success rate to a near 0% success rate, all because a crowd was booing him. I would argue that the crowd booing is very similar to the taunting, alt-chatting, and flaming that happens in everyday pubs. You may think that it doesn't affect you, but thinking it doesn't affect you won't stop it from hurting your play. So, with all of that being said, pay attention to and respect your emotions. It's totally okay to feel. Don't let your ego prevent you from playing better and getting better at Dota. Mute people who are complete assholes. This is where I will propose the final rule. Mute the enemy team by default. And instantly mute negative people on your team. Do not subject yourself to more bullshit than you have to. Remember, negativity cascades, even if it's small and you don't think it affects you. The bottom line is you are scientifically way more good at Dota than you think you are. And all you need to do is train yourself to play only when you have a genuinely positive mindset. And soon after, you'll start realizing your full potential. That's it for this video. If you like this sort of thing, make sure to support your boy by subscribing, hitting the notification bell, thumbs upping, and commenting for the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I hope to see you in another video.